April 22nd, SpaceX, the Elon Musk-controlled rocket and AI conglomerate, announced it had struck a deal with Cursor, the AI-powered coding platform built by Anisphere. The structure is unusual. SpaceX will pay $10 billion for collaborative work and has secured an option to fully acquire Cursor for $60 billion later this year. That's not a typo. $60 billion for a startup that was valued at $50 billion just weeks ago in private fundraising talks. We're going to ask the hard questions today. Why now? What does this really mean for developers, for enterprise customers, and for the competitive dynamics of the AI industry? And what does it mean for Anthropic and Claude, which have deep ties to Cursor? Let's dig in. Let's start with the mechanics of the deal itself, because the structure is genuinely unusual and tells us a lot about what each party wants. There are really two layers here. The first is a $10 billion collaboration agreement. SpaceX pays Cursor to work together on building what they describe as the world's best coding and knowledge work AI. That payment is staggered over time and may partially consist of compute access rather than pure cash. The second layer is the option clause. SpaceX has secured the right, but not the obligation, to fully acquire Cursor for $60 billion before the end of this year. Why structure it as an option? Because SpaceX is planning what could be the largest IPO in history this June, targeting a valuation between $1.75 and $1.8 trillion. They want to avoid updating their financial filings before the listing. An option keeps Cursor's liabilities off the balance sheet until after they go public, at which point they can finance the acquisition using their newly issued public stock. The timing is surgical and deliberate. Now let's get into the real strategic rationale. And I want to be honest here. There are multiple overlapping motivations, and they're all legitimate. First and most urgently, the IPO story. SpaceX merged with XAI in February and is racing toward what could be a record public offering. Investors are being asked to value this company at nearly $2 trillion, and for that price, the story must be airtight. Cursor is the hottest product in developer AI right now. Pairing it with Colossus is exactly the kind of headline that makes institutional investors pay attention. Second, Cursor has an existential dependency problem. It's built on Anthropic's Claude and OpenAI's GPT. Those two companies are now launching their own competing developer tools, Claude Code and Codex. Cursor is essentially paying its competitors to power its product. This deal is a strategic exit from that dependency. Third, there's a raw compute angle. Cursor's engineering team has been brilliant, but bottlenecked, their own words. With Colossus behind them, they can scale training in ways that were simply impossible before. And fourth, don't underestimate the data moat. Every keystroke from millions of developers is a training signal. That usage data is priceless. Let's talk about you, the customer or enterprise partner of Cursor. What does this mean for you today? The most urgent concern is model neutrality, and it is a genuine one. Right now, Cursor is a marketplace of sorts. You can use Claude, GPT-4, and Cursor's own composer model. Industry analysts are already warning that under SpaceX ownership, that flexibility will likely disappear. Cursor will become an XAI first and probably XAI only platform. If your workflows or compliance requirements depend on Anthropic's zero data retention guarantees, you need to get legal on the phone today and push for change of control clauses in your contracts. The window to negotiate that is closing. However, and this is important, it is not all bad news. SpaceX has explicitly said they plan to keep the entire Cursor team intact. This is not an acqui-hire like Google's purchase of Windsurf. The product leadership stays, the engineering culture stays, and the compute access dramatically improves. Cursor's composer model already showed what's possible, scaling reinforcement learning 20-fold with early access to XAI chips. With 1 million GPU equivalents behind it, the product could leap ahead of the competition in ways that benefit everyday users. So review your contracts urgently, but don't panic about product quality. This deal fundamentally redraws the competitive map in AI coding, which is arguably the hottest product category in all of technology right now. Let me give you the picture. Cursor was, until this week, a neutral Switzerland of the AI developer world. It resold access to Claude, to GPT-4, and offered its own composer model. That neutrality made it attractive to a huge swath of enterprises. Now, the battlefield lines are hardening. Microsoft's GitHub Copilot remains the incumbent by install base, but has been losing mindshare to Cursor among cutting-edge developers. Here's the twist. We now know Microsoft looked at buying Cursor before SpaceX swooped in. That's a significant miss for them. OpenAI's Codex is growing explosively, 4 million active users in under 2 weeks, but it was benefiting from the Cursor distribution halo. That halo is now fading. And Anthropic, whose Claude code has helped drive the company to $30 billion in annualized revenue, stands in an interesting position. They lose a major distribution channel through Cursor, but they gain an opportunity to capture enterprises that want model neutrality and are now fleeing Cursor. In the background, Amazon just dropped $5 billion into Anthropic. This is not a bilateral AI war. It is a multi-front battle for developer hearts, minds, and infrastructure contracts. Let's talk specifically about Anthropic and Claude, because this deal has unusually direct implications. Here's the honest picture. There is short-term pain and medium-term opportunity. The short-term pain is straightforward. Cursor was one of the most important distribution channels for Claude. Every time a developer used Cursor and selected Claude as their model, Anthropic earned inference revenue. That relationship is now on a countdown clock. As Cursor integrates deeper with XAI's Colossus infrastructure and trains its own proprietary models, the need to route calls to Claude diminishes and then disappears. That's real lost revenue. But zoom out, and the strategic picture is actually quite favorable for Anthropic. Claude code has been growing so fast that Anthropic hit $30 billion in annualized revenue this month, independently of the Cursor channel. The Amazon $5 billion investment, announced just this week, gives Anthropic the compute and distribution muscle to accelerate even further. And here is the positioning gift this deal hands Anthropic. Enterprises that valued Cursor for its model neutrality are now actively looking for alternatives. Anthropic can walk into every one of those conversations and say, we are the neutral, safety-aligned, Amazon-backed option, not Musk's platform. For a large chunk of the Fortune 500, that is an extremely compelling message. So what actually happens from here? I see this playing out in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 runs from now through the IPO, which is expected in June. During this window, the engineering partnership is the story. Cursor's team gets access to Colossus at full scale. We're talking tens of thousands of chips for training Composer 2. This is where the technical value gets created. Meanwhile, SpaceX will absolutely feature Cursor in its IPO prospectus as evidence that XAI is a real AI business and not just a side project. Expect aggressive marketing language about world's best coding AI. Phase 2 begins after the IPO. Now that SpaceX has publicly traded stock, they have the currency to close the $60 billion acquisition without a cash crunch. This is when the organizational integration happens, and history tells us that's where things get complicated. Michael Truel, Cursor's 25-year-old CEO, will either be given a significant leadership role or will eventually depart. Phase 3, looking into 2027 and beyond, is where the strategy gets truly ambitious. The dream scenario for Musk is that Cursor becomes the developer-facing surface of the entire SpaceX XAI empire. SpaceX has enormous internal software needs: Starship, Starlink, Falcon. If Cursor's AI can be trained on that engineering corpus, you have a coding model that understands rocket science at a level no competitor can match. That's a genuinely differentiated moat. The ripple effects of this deal extend far beyond 2 companies. Let me walk you through 6 distinct domains that are being reshaped right now. First, enterprise IT strategy. The AI coding tools market is consolidating into 3 distinct political and technological camps: the Microsoft and OpenAI camp, the Amazon and Anthropic camp, and now the SpaceX and XAI camp. For CIOs, this is no longer just a procurement decision about features. It's a decision about which technology coalition you're joining, what data you're sharing, and what political associations your vendor stack implies. Second, the developer community itself will fracture along familiar lines. Power users who want the best model regardless of brand will follow the compute. Privacy-conscious developers and those working in regulated industries will gravitate toward neutral or open-source alternatives. Third, for venture capital and the M&A market, this deal resets the price floor for any remaining independent AI coding tool. Tab9, Continue.dev, and similar companies just became dramatically more expensive to acquire. Fourth, this consolidation pressure is the best thing that ever happened to the open source coding AI movement. DeepSeek Coder and its successors become strategically important as neutral infrastructure. Fifth, regulators, particularly in the EU, will take notice. The concentration of compute, developer data, and social media signals in one Musk-controlled empire is precisely the kind of market structure antitrust authorities care about. And sixth, the SpaceX angle that nobody is talking about enough. What happens when Cursor's AI is trained on Starship engineering code? That is a genuinely genius capability. Let's think about where each company ends up in the long run. And I want to give you an honest bull case and a bear case for each. For SpaceX and XAI, the bull case is compelling. This deal plugs the biggest hole in Musk's AI empire. He has the compute, Colossus is real and it is massive. He has the money, or will have it post-IPO. What he's been missing is a developer-facing product with genuine user love. Cursor has that. If XAI can close the model quality gap with Anthropic and OpenAI within 12 to 18 months, the flywheel is real. But the bear case is equally important. SpaceX is already financially strained from absorbing XAI and X, both of which are consuming capital at significant rates. If the IPO price is below the $1.8 trillion target, the $60 billion acquisition becomes a much harder financial conversation. The option may simply expire unexercised, and Cursor finds itself back in the fundraising market, this time with a confusing story. For Cursor, the dynamics are different. Here's the thing. Cursor already won this negotiation. The $10 billion collaboration payment is guaranteed regardless of whether the full acquisition happens. That is years of compute and runway. The company wins no matter what. The real question is whether CEO Michael Truhl can maintain the product culture that made Cursor great inside what is, frankly, a very politically charged and engineering military organization. History suggests that's hard. Watch his autonomy closely. Let me bring this all together with a rapid-fire stakeholder scan, because this deal affects different parties in very different ways, and the nuance here matters. Individual developers. The near-term news is good. More compute means faster model improvements, and Cursor's product team isn't going anywhere immediately. But watch carefully as pricing evolves post-acquisition. $60 billion needs to be recouped. Enterprise CIOs. This is the group that needs to act most urgently. If your organization has data handling commitments tied to specific model providers via Cursor, the clock is ticking. Get legal involved now. Demand explicit provisions before Cursor changes hands. SpaceX investors. This is a bullish signal. The AI credibility gap was XAI's biggest IPO vulnerability, and Cursor patches it in a way that is immediately legible to institutional investors. Venture capitalists and startup founders in the developer tool space, this is a loud consolidation signal. The window for neutral, independent AI middleware companies is closing fast. Pick your partner or become someone's acquisition. Anthropic. We covered this in depth, but to summarize, short-term pain, medium-term opportunity. The Amazon backing and Claude code momentum mean they are well-positioned to capture the enterprise customers who are now reconsidering their AI stack. And finally, the open-source community. Perversely, they may be the biggest beneficiary of all. Every time the proprietary stack concentrates power, it energizes the open ecosystem. Expect a wave of new open-weight coding models and IDE forks in the months ahead. Let me leave you with the 5 things you need to remember, and then specific action items for whoever you are in this story. First, do not lose sight of the IPO motive. Everything about the timing of this deal, announced before the SpaceX confidential isling period, structured as an option to avoid balance sheet impact, featuring in every investor conversation, tells you this is primarily about the IPO narrative. That's not cynical, it's just important context. Second, model neutrality at Cursor is over. Begin planning on that assumption today. Third, XAI's compute advantage is real and should not be dismissed. But model quality is where developer loyalty lives, and there is a gap to close before the average engineer would choose Grok over Claude or GPT. Fourth, the structural winners in the market dislocation are Anthropic, Amazon Web Services, and open source coding models. Position your stack accordingly. And fifth, Cursor has already won. $10 billion, regardless of what happens next, transforms Anisphere's financial position permanently. On the action items, if you're in procurement, get your legal team on the phone today. If you're a dev team lead, now is the time to benchmark alternatives rather than scramble reactively later. If you're an investor, the SpaceX IPO just became more interesting, but watch the model quality benchmarks like a hawk. And if you're a founder in this space, pick your camp before the camps get picked for you. I'll leave you with SpaceX's own words from their announcement post: the best coding and knowledge work AI in the world. That is an audacious claim. It is not true today. By any benchmark, Claude and GPT-4 remain ahead on coding tasks. But ambition in technology has a way of becoming self-fulfilling when it's backed by unlimited compute, a brilliant engineering team, and a culture that treats the word impossible as a challenge. The question of whether SpaceX, XAI, and Cursor can fulfill that promise is now the central question in developer AI for the next 18 months. Watch 4 things closely. First, how XAI's model benchmarks evolve against Claude and GPT. Second, how the SpaceX IPO prices. That determines the financial fuel for the full acquisition. Third, what happens to Cursor's enterprise contracts and model routing over the next 6 months. And fourth, whether Anthropic's Claude code growth accelerates as Anthropic's Claude growth accelerates as enterprise customers reevaluate their AI coding stack. The game has changed. The pieces are in motion. Before we end, request you to join us as a member and support our work.
Thank you for watching today. Please like, share, and subscribe to the AI with Arun show. I will see you in the next video.